Hi, I'm Sal from Our Next Make. Today we're going to talk about the circular saw. This is likely the second power tool that you'll add to your collection, second only to a drill. Knowing how to properly use this will create better cuts and keep you safe. Let's start with the anatomy. It has a primary handle with a trigger to start the motor, and often a second handle to help you better control the tool. Some models have a safety switch to prevent accidental starting of the tool. The saw rests on a base plate, or what's often called a shoe. The blade is covered by a blade guard that will automatically retract when used properly. And the motor will be powered by a cord or a battery. Be sure to remove the power source before making any adjustments to your saw. Most cuts with the circular saw will be made with the blade 90 degrees to the shoe. But you can tilt the blade when you need to cut another angle. Just loosen the angle lock lever or knob and adjust the blade to the desired angle. You can use the angle gauge on the side of the tool or use a separate gauge to hit a specific angle. The blade height can also be adjusted, and although the tool will work in most situations with the blade fully extended, there are a lot of good reasons why you should adjust the blade height for different cuts. Doing so is fast and easy, and makes a big difference. Just loosen the blade height lock lever or knob, and adjust the blade to the desired height. You can use the height gauge on the tool, or measure the blade with a tape measure. One of the best ways to set the blade height correctly though, is to use the material itself. Aim to have the blade just a bit proud of the material. This minimizes your exposure to the spinning blade and ensures that the blade guard functions properly with the least amount of effort. When you're done with a cut, you're likely going to want to set the tool down so you can move on to the next task. But be sure to wait until the tool comes to a complete stop before setting it down. Although the blade guard should prevent a spinning blade from coming in contact with the surface, it's possible that the guard got jammed during the cut and won't close. If this happens, the blade will make contact and send the tool shooting across the surface with the potential to cause injury. Your saw will come with a blade so you can start using it right out of the box, but it'll likely be a basic blade that you'll want to upgrade at some point. Changing a blade is fairly straightforward. After first removing the power source, locate the blade lock button or lever. While slightly pushing down on it, turn the blade with your hand. You'll eventually feel the button slide in as it fully seats. Now you can loosen the bolt that holds in the blade. Your saw should have come with a tool to do this. This model came with a simple hex wrench, and this one with an Allen wrench. When replacing the blade, make sure you mount it in the correct orientation with the teeth pointing forward and up into the shoe. Now let's make some cuts and talk about a few more features of the saw. First things first, never start the saw with the blade in contact with the wood. Best case, it'll ruin your piece, causing splintering and blowout. Worst case, it causes kickback and injury. It also has the potential to damage your tool. Always start the tool with the blade away from the workpiece and then move it into the cut. If you're cutting on sawhorses, you're going to want to avoid cutting in between the horses. That's because as you finish the cut, the two pieces are going to want to fall in on each other and pinch the blade. That could cause kickback. So instead, aim to cut outbound of the horses. An alternative to using sawhorses is to use a sacrificial piece on top of a work surface. That way you can place your wood right on top of it and cut on a nice stable surface. I'm using foam here, but you could use MDF or any other scrap material. We want to use a circular saw to cut a small piece off of this plywood. Now, as a righty, I would be inclined to just cut on the right side of my body, which is comfortable. But let's take a look at the bottom of the circular saw. The shoe has a large bearing surface and a small one. If I were to cut on the right side, I would actually be using the small bearing surface, which is fine, but it would mean I'd have to pay a little more attention to not rock the cut. So if I simply turn the board around, I can make that same cut and use the large bearing surface. Before I make the cut though, I want to consider one other thing. On a small piece like this, instead of using one of my hands to hold the wood, I'm going to use a couple clamps to hold it securely to my work table, and then I have both hands that can control the saw. Many of the cuts you'll make with your circular saw will be freehand, where you'll just follow a line that you've drawn. To do this accurately, you can use the notch on the front of the shoe. It's there to help you follow your cut line. Let's take a closer look at the notch to understand how to use it. The notch will have one edge that you'll follow when the blade is at 90 degrees, and another when the blade is at 45 degrees. This saw labels them clearly, whereas this one requires you to remember which is which. Another important thing to keep in mind is where the saw kerf is in relation to this edge. As you can see here, the edge is in line with the left side of the blade kerf. You'll need to keep this in mind when following your line and compensate for that offset accordingly. To get even better cuts, you can use a speed square to help guide the saw. You can either just eyeball the location or take a measurement from the saw blade to the outside of the shoe, and then mark an offset line on your workpiece to locate the speed square. Just remember to keep the blade kerf in mind when cutting, and make sure it falls on the scrap side of the cut and not on the keep side. Last, but certainly not least, let's take a minute to talk about safety. You absolutely have to wear safety glasses when using this tool. It throws around way too many particles that could get into your eyes. I also recommend that you wear hearing protection as well as lung protection. In the long run, you'll be thankful that you did. When you're using the tool, make sure your loose clothing is far from the blade and that you're standing on stable ground. If you need to use the tool in this orientation, where you say cutting the top off of a post, never use it above your shoulder height, most certainly never above your head. The circular saw is a great tool to have in your collection. If you take your time and are mindful when using it, you can create great results and stay safe while doing so. I really hope you enjoyed this video. And if there are other tools that you want to learn more about, please let me know in the comments. Until then, I'll see you on our next make.